Before we start the hearing today, David Carey, Planning Director of the Planning Department, will call the meeting to order for the purpose of electing a temporary chairperson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. David Carey, Director of the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. We have a unique situation. Our Chair and Vice Chair unexpectedly are not able to attend today. And in that event, normally the Chair would appoint somebody, but that person is not available to do that. So we thankfully, in our rules and procedures for the Planning Commission, the Planning Director is at that point allowed to open the hearing. So I hereby open the hearing for this date, and I would be asking for a motion and a second, and then a vote for a temporary chair to be appointed for today's meeting.
I would nominate Tracy Edgerton to be temporary chair for this meeting.
Second.
Thank you. We can call the vote.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and we'll move forward with our regular agenda.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of December 6th, 2023. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available online or at the Planning Department, room 213. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking lot across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cell phones may not be used in the chamber during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items: 1.2, Special Permit 23041, and 4.1E, Preliminary Plat 23001. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held November 15th, 2023.
I move approval.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Abstain.
Edens,
You can't.
You can't.
You need all 5 votes.
All right, then, I'll approve.
Did you say Edens? Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jennifer to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jennifer, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Item 1.1, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 23018, to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. A request made for a proposal conservation easement to preserve, protect, and maintain garden space on property generally located at southwest of North 26th and U Street. Item 1.2, Special Permit 23041, to allow for a garage to be reconstructed with setback waivers on property generally located at 527 North 31st Street. This is final action. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
Yes.
On 1.1, the 23018, we discussed this at Clinton Neighborhood Organization briefly. It was mostly about the CUP, which is now at City Council and already passed through this body.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites to be disclosed?
No.
If there's anyone here wishing to speak on the consent agenda items, please stand and state that item.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on any of the items on the consent agenda? If so, please stand and state that item. Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda. Campbell?
Second, Edens.
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Great. I will now ask Jennifer to call the requests for deferral.
We have received written communication on behalf of the applicant requesting a 2-week deferral for item 4.2, special permit 23042, for personal wireless facilities to allow a 239-foot self-support tower on property generally located at 7459 West Roca Road. This action is final. This would delay public hearing and action to the December 20th, 2023 Planning Commission hearing.
I move that we approve deferral for 2 weeks.
Second, Edens.
Jennifer, do you want to call the vote, please?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this application today rather than waiting until the actual public hearing? If so, please stand and identify yourself. Okay. Next, we will now proceed to public hearings. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide them to the clerk. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The clerk will use the light system to help aid your timing for your testimony. The lights will appear on the monitors provided. The clerk will indicate when you have 1 minute remaining to wrap up your testimony. The red light indicates that your 5 minutes has expired. Once the final minute has lapsed, the clerk will indicate that your time is up. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the hearing. Jennifer, please call the first public hearing item.
The Planning Commission members received a staff memo dated December 5th, 2023, identifying a revision to the staff report dated November 21st of 2023 for item 4.1E, preliminary plat 23001. Item 4.1A, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 23005 to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County 2050 Comprehensive Plan to revise the future land use map from industrial use to commercial use on property generally located at the northeast corner of Northwest 48th Street and Interstate 80. Staff recommendation is approval. Item 4.1B, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 23019 to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, the Northwest 48th and West Vine redevelopment plan, and the Falcon Corner redevelopment project to include a large retail building and accessory commercial uses on property generally located at Northwest 48th Street and Interstate 80. Staff recommendation is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Item 4.1C, Annexation 23005 to annex property located at the northeast corner of Northwest 48th Street and Interstate 80 and southwest corner of Northwest 48th and West Vine Street. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Item 4.1D, change of zone 23019 from AG Agricultural District to H4 Highway Commercial District on property generally located at the northeast corner of Northwest 48th Street and Interstate 80. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Item 4.1E, preliminary plat 23001 for a new preliminary plat to show 5 commercial lots and 3 outlots located at the northeast corner of Northwest 48th Street and Interstate 80. This is final action. Are there any ex parte communications to disclose on these applications?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information that you learned while visiting any of these sites to be disclosed?
No. Tom?
Tom Chaka, planning staff, 555 South 10th Street. As just read, there are several applications for this project, Falcon Corner. I am going to speak on all but the comp plan conformance, and urban development will address that one after I'm done. First of all, I'll talk about the annexation. Annexation is for approximately 52 acres, includes the area, as this shows up, north of Interstate 80 up to approximately Vine Street, and this lot here on the west side. The applicant's area is this part here, approximately 43 acres. This lot is being brought in at the request of the planning department, and the reason we're bringing this into the annexation is so that it can meet the requirement of being contiguous to the city limits. Currently, the city limits ends here on Vine Street, and just this little piece next to it would not be considered contiguous by our city attorney's recommendation to include this other lot. City services are available. There's an existing water main in Northwest 48th, and sanitary sewer is available to serve the area. The annexation area is within Tier 1 Priority A. The change of zone application is to rezone this area from AG to H4. There's existing H4 to the south. This area over here, although zoned R3, is within the I-80 West Lincoln Business Center planned unit development. That PUD does show commercial land use for here on the south side of Vine Street. The change of zone area is approximately 15 acres. Application, going through this, is a comprehensive plan amendment to revise the future land use plan. The proposed amendment is changing this area here from industrial to commercial for the Falcon Corner project. Falcon Corner project ends approximately here, so we are adding a little bit of area that's outside of their project area, and that is so it will meet up with this other commercial to the north. This proposed land use area is approximately 63 acres. This change is compatible with the other commercial areas surrounding it. The fourth application I will speak of is the preliminary plat. So this is the boundary of the preliminary plat. Again, just to remind you, this area up here is where the change of zone is. This is already H4. Let me put up the site plan here. The proposed preliminary plat is for 5 commercial lots on approximately 43 acres. Site plan identifies 1 lot of 16.88 acres and then 4 smaller lots, 1 here and 3 up here. The plan also includes building West Vine Street, continuing it to the to their east boundary of their project. There is an existing traffic signal already here that may have to be relocated with Vine Street. This plan doesn't show it, but there will be a right turn lane here on Vine Street to go north. As mentioned before, the development will be served with city water and sewer. There is a existing 16-inch water main in Northwest 48th Street. The developer will construct a 12-inch main in West Vine Street to extend to the end of West Vine, and will construct an 8-inch sanitary sewer main to serve the development. Sewer main is coming from the east into this project. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Tom? Tom, when you were describing the annexation, you mentioned the land to the west of Northwest 48th Street.
Yes.
According to the report, there had been a conversation with that landowner. Was there anything that came of light through that conversation?
I didn't actually speak to the landowner. I sent a letter and
Okay.
never received a response.
Okay. Thank you. And then it also said that there was a traffic study that was submitted with these applications, and it mentioned something about additional information for review at a later date.
I think that's all been taken care of
Okay.
since the report. I believe we have LTU here if you
Okay.
need any additional information.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Tom? Great, thank you very much.
Callie's here to discuss the redevelopment plan.
Haley.
Hello, Hallie Salem, Urban Development Department, 555 South 10th Street. Before you today, as part of these 5 items, is the Northwest 48th and West Vine redevelopment area and plan, and as well as the first project identified for the area as part of that plan, Falcon Corner project. The city council declared this area blighted previously in February of 2008. It has not been developed, although there has been interest in the area for quite some time. Approving this plan would be the next step in the redevelopment process for this area in correlation to the interest in redeveloping this area as commercial. The redevelopment area in total encompasses approximately 503 acres, generally located north of I-80, between Northwest 40th Street and Northwest 56th Street. Just to confirm, these are both Northwest 56 and Northwest 40th, although they are not necessarily labeled as such, so we will make that fixed to the map. Currently, land uses in the area include the public, agricultural, and undeveloped properties, although this redevelopment area has been blighted designated as blighted for 15 years. The lack of road infrastructure in the area has, as well as topography issues, has discouraged development in this area. To address those challenges, the key focus of this project is extending West Vine Street to the east to connect the area of the city that has previously lacked connectivity. The Falcon Corner project intends to develop several commercial sites as previously shown within the Falcon Corner redevelopment project area, and that would take place over one or more phases. The TIF generated from the development will go towards supporting the construction of this roadway of West Vine, focusing especially on the elements of the street that would otherwise not be required as part of the commercial area being built on its own. So it would be the generally thought to be include those elements that would be above and beyond constructing a roadway specifically for that commercial development. The city expects to bring a redevelopment agreement forward to City Council following approval of this plan amendment. The redevelopment agreement then would further define those phases and the extent of TIF support for the project. And that project is generally defined in that redevelopment area. And I think that's it. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Hallie? Hallie, when there's a finding of blight and substandard, that just kind of continues with the land until there's a reason for that to change. Is that correct?
It does for a period of time. There's new state legislation that was adopted that was that provides a limit to that time frame, and then we need to circle back and redetermine blighted and substandard conditions.
But in this case, we're not at that limit.
We are not at that limit.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. At this time, we'll take testimony from the applicant.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, I'm Mark Hunziker, appearing on behalf of FFF LLC, the owner and developer of this site. I think my job at this point is to not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory and to see if there are any questions you may have.
We appreciate that. Any questions for the applicant at this time?
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Oh,
either.
I would just ask that you all vote for this since we need 5 to get moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, testimony in support of this application. Is there any testimony in support? Any neutral testimony or testimony in opposition? Do we have any additional staff questions? And Mark, I assume you're okay not to rebut anything that's happened since you were up here? Okay, excellent.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
I would move that we approve Comprehensive Plan Amendment 230005.
Second, Edens?
We'll go ahead with discussion, and we will discuss all 5 matters at once, and then we'll vote separately.
I would, will support this, and I think it's filling in a nice piece that has been dormant for a long time. So I think all of the options we have here are good for approval.
I agree. I think that given that with the school opening in that area, there's new opportunities to bring development to this area with infrastructure being available, with the connections to the other land use and zoning that is in that area. I think it's a great project and appreciate that it's moving forward. Anyone else? Jennifer, will you call the vote, please?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
And I would move to approve Comprehensive Plan Conformance 23019.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
And I would move that we approve Annexation 23005.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
And I would move that we approve change of zone 23019.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
And I would move that we approve preliminary plat 23001.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Excellent. Good work, folks.
Right off the list.
Okay.
Goes a bunch.
Go ahead.
Next item is 4.3 miscellaneous 23007, revising the funding outlook to reflect partial recession of federal coronavirus response and relief act funds and add federal carbon reduction program funds, revising the
Fiscally.
fiscally constrained plan to update the cost for Saltello Road, 27th Street to 68th Street, project under the fiscally constrained rural road and bridge capital projects, add the multi-model transportation center and maintenance facility projects under the priority transit projects, add the B Street Bicycle Boulevard and Rock Island Trail widening projects, including the multi-model transportation center active transportation enhancements under the multi-model transportation center project, and update the cost for the Rock Island Trail grade separated crossing at Old Cheney Road project. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of the site to be disclosed?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. Rachel?
Rachel Christopher with the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department and Lincoln Metropolitan Planning Organization, 555 South 10th Street. You have before you a proposed amendment to the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan. This amendment is being brought forward by staff. So this is a outline of the changes included. It encompasses quite a few different things that I'll just touch on briefly on each. So first of all, we have some updates to projects in the long-range plan that are updates and more like cleanup items. The first one is to the county project for improving Saltillo Road from 27th to 68th Street. And this item is simply to increase the project cost from about $8.7 million to $12.4 million, as the costs for that project have increased for various reasons and due to inflation. So we want to reflect that. And then we also have 3 other projects that we want to identify that are listed here: the Multimodal Transportation Center, the StarTran Maintenance Facility, and the B Street Bike Boulevard. These projects are all already listed in our Transportation Improvement Program, which is our 4-year program of projects. And so what we would be doing here is just making sure that the long-range plan conforms to the Transportation Improvement Program and reflects those projects as they need to be shown, so that when the time comes for federal funds to be obligated, they're in there as they need to be. And then in addition to those changes, we have some changes to funding. The long-range plan includes a funding outlook that basically estimates anticipated funding for transportation projects that we think we will receive through the planning horizon of 2050, and then identifies what projects can be funded with that amount. So a couple of changes to funding that we have. The first one is for the coronavirus funds. So the MPO received some pandemic funds for transportation projects several years ago, and was working on spending those down, and was able to spend down quite a bit of them. We were able to spend down $1.4 million, But then through the national debt ceiling agreement in 2023, the remaining funds were rescinded. So that was just kind of something that happened, but we were able to get the majority of them spent down before that happened. So we would just be reflecting the amount that was rescinded in our funding outlook. And then the second funding item is for the Carbon Reduction Program, or CRP for short. The CRP funds are a new type of federal funding for transportation that was authorized through the most recent National Transportation Bill. In the MPO, Lincoln and Lancaster County are recipients of about $4.4 million in CRP funds over 5 years. And these are for basically a variety of projects that would result in reduced CO2 emissions. So, pedestrian bicycle facilities are one of the natural fits for those funds. We do have to provide a 20% local match for any federal funds that are used, so that's important. And so in our funding outlook, we're adding them. When the long-range plan was created, the details of this funding source were not known. So we're reflecting them now. We are showing them projecting out through 2050 just for planning purposes, but if any additional funds were to be authorized after that first 5 years of funds we're getting, that would have to be done by Congress. And then resulting from that, we have 3 projects that are being proposed for the use of the CRP funds. And for those 5 years of funds. So a few criteria that we had for these, they needed to meet the eligibility of this funding source, which has some criteria associated with it. They needed to have a local match and also be relatively shovel ready, if you will, because we do need to spend them within 4 years. And then we also took a look at projects that generally lacked already a dedicated source of funding. So that kind of narrowed it down quite a bit. In conversations with city staff and other departments, these are the 3 projects that we're proposing. The Rock Island Trail grade separating crossing at Old Cheney Road, widening of the Rock Island Trail, and then active transportation enhancements associated with the Chartrand Multimodal Center. Just briefly, so the Rock Island Trail grade separated crossing is on Old Cheney Road, just a little bit east of 16th Street. That project has, been talked about for several years now, so we would be proposing to fund it this way. Rock Island Trail widening would be for widening of that trail from 8 to 11 feet between A Street and Nebraska Parkway. That's a trail that is a major connector north-south in Lincoln, and it gets a lot of traffic, so widening it would help with the capacity. And then the last one for active transportation enhancements, these would be basically pedestrian and bicycle improvements in and around the future multimodal center to facilitate people on foot or by bike coming to or from the center. So that would be things like enhanced crossings, various kinds of bike facilities, improved sidewalks and lighting, potentially a bike share station. And the cost for those enhancements is actually included up under the overall multimodal center project in the long-range plan. With that, I will see if you have any questions.
Rachel, that 20% match, do you have to have the sources identified before moving forward with that?
Generally, yes. The the long range plan and also our other plan, our transportation improvement program, have to be fiscally constrained, meaning that any funds that you show need to be reasonably anticipated,
Right.
that we'll get them or that we have them as far as local match.
And you mentioned fiscally constrained. With regard to the coronavirus funds going away, how did that change the either timing or priority of projects?
Yeah, the funds that are going away from coronavirus are being covered by a different federal funding source that we have called Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG.
Okay. So nothing else had to change?
So nothing is changing there. They actually were already under that header on our TIP to help with spending them down. So Lincoln Transportation and Utilities allotment of STBG is going to cover that.
Great. Additional questions for Rachel? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I assume you are also the applicant? Okay.
Correct.
Is there any testimony in support for this application? Any testimony in support?
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. Of course, we want to support Saltillo Road going forward. This is really just cleanup to keep it moving forward. There's a nuance in federal funding that says if your project increases by $2 million, you need to go back through and put it in the LRTP. And I just want to thank Rachel for keeping this moving along, because we had actually been through one review with NDOT and we're looking for the sign off a couple weeks ago. And had Rachel not jumped on this for us, the project would have taken a 3-month delay to get it through MPO Technical Committee, Officials Committee, and of course you. And so I'm really thankful that she was tenacious with that, because we do really need to get the Saltillo Road project through. And I will note that the Saltillo Road project is just a little bit different than some of our other highway safety improvement funds, in that it's a 90% federally funded.
Will Saltillo be totally shut down during this project then, or will it be segmented, or?
At this time, we anticipate segmenting it, and we do have that on our website.
Okay.
So you can take a look at it. And we do have, we're coordinating the detour route with the city, because since we have produced the Saltillo plans, we don't have to detour through the city anymore. We can detour on the South Beltway, possibly. And so, there's always those type of things to work out in the end. Things change. These projects, Saltillo has taken almost 8 years to develop, which it's kind of sad. You're sad, glad. I'm glad we're almost through the finish line, but the process has been long.
Any other questions?
And much needed.
Excuse me?
And much needed.
And much needed, like many of our other projects. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Any other testimony in support? Is there any neutral testimony or testimony in opposition? Additional questions for staff? Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing. Campbell?
Second, Edens.
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
And I would move that we approve miscellaneous 23007.
Second, Edens.
Discussion.
All of those projects are very worthwhile, and especially Saltillo is so needed. So I'll be supporting this entire proposal.
Yeah.
A little history on the Rock Island. And we happen to live backing up to the Rock Island Trail south of Calvert. And I was on the board of the Great Plains Trails Network when we raised the funds, and it was a public-private effort. We had X number of dollars to build the trail from A Street as far as we could. If we had built an 11 or 12-foot trail, we would have had to stop short of Calvert. So we built an 8-foot trail and took it all the way to what was then Highway 2. and it was a tremendous success. That was a catalyst to build more trails. People were wanting trails throughout the city at that point. And then the Great Plains Trails Network also did trail counts. And even after half a dozen other trails were completed throughout the city, that Rock Island Trail continued to be the most heavily used and narrowest trail in the city. So, and then when you get to Old Cheney Road, you're taking your life in your hands to get across. So I'm all in favor of those parts of this.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Thank you. Yes, I think it's essential that we ensure that our LRTP is kept up to date, and this amendment makes a lot of sense, and all the projects are relatively straightforward and certainly priorities in our community. Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Hectorton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. The Planning Commission members received a staff memo dated December 5th, 2023, identifying change to the right-of-way map of the county text amendment 23012. So next item is 4.4, County Text Amendment 23012 to the Lancaster County zoning regulations and the Lancaster County subdivision regulations to require all new local streets in the county to be private roadways. This amendment also clarifies the required right-of-way width for the major streets in the county, along with several minor updates. This application is to amend Article 14, Community Unit Plan, and Article 19, Board of Zoning Appeals of the Lancaster County zoning regulations. It also proposes to amend Chapter 2, Definitions, Chapter 4, Design Standards, Chapter 5, Minimum Improvements, Chapter 7, Form of Preliminary Plat of Lancaster County subdivision regulations. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
No. Steve?
Steve Hendrickson with the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. This is an application that is a bit unique in that it comes from the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners. It basically, as was announced, the end result of this is in the county jurisdiction is to prohibit the further approval of any local public streets, and that all local streets would then have to be private roadways. One of the main considerations here was the concern into the future of the impact of having additional local streets that the county board would have to, and the county engineer would have to maintain in that budget impact. I would also note that we do have Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer here, and John Berry with the County Engineering Office, and also John Ward with the County Attorney's Office, if you have any additional questions. What I'll do is basically go over the amendment itself, kind of hit some of the high points, and would also note that with any text amendment that hit multiple chapters in both the zoning and the subdivision regulation, we took the opportunity to add a few other things in it that are unrelated. So as noted in the staff report, there are a few other things that are basically minor cleanups that go along with it. And again, this is in the county jurisdiction. In the city jurisdiction, it is not changing the regulations, because in the city jurisdiction, we definitely want to keep the option for public streets, because within the city's 3-mile zoning jurisdiction outside of the city limits, a lot of those streets and subdivisions could ultimately end up inside of the city someday. And we want to make sure that we have the connections in between neighborhoods set up for the future. Because the one downside about having private roadways for local streets is the people within those subdivisions very much view them as their streets, even though they have a public access easement, and having traffic from an adjacent connecting subdivision drive through their private roadways so that they have to maintain the streets that somebody else is using is often viewed quite negatively. So in the city jurisdiction, we would not be making this change, but the request here is to make the change in the county. And at the end, I'll also then go over staff memo that we sent to you on December 5th that had 2 little changes to the application. So basically going through the text here, make sure that gets up on the monitors. We're basically in several places using the more generic term roadway when we're talking about what previously was public streets or private roadways. So this is the text on page 187 makes that change. And then as we on page 189, and this is of the changes to the zoning regulations, we basically strike out a part that we haven't been implementing for many, many years, and that's where you have a much more detailed analysis and indication of trees on the site. Generally, the tree mass is being shown, and so this is just a kind of a cleanup to remove some text that has not been used, as well as some text that says when you have a grading plan and you're having an area where you're removing fill, that you have to identify where, or bringing fill in, you have to identify exactly where the fill is coming from. And a rather cumbersome requirement that, again, hasn't been used for quite some time. So it eliminates that requirement as well. The text does add a definition for private roadways then, and going over to the subdivision regulations, and updates a table that has to do with right-of-way. And currently, the subdivision ordinance says it refers to the comprehensive plan for a map as to which streets are major streets and which streets should have a greater right-of-way. Instead, since we no longer had that map in the comprehensive plan, we are adding the map to the actual subdivision regulations. And then we're also identifying that private roadways need to have a 60-foot outlot. That's just really a common practice. Similar to when you have a local street, you have a 60-foot wide right-of-way. Here it would just be in an outlot, so it could be privately owned. And then we note then that the section line roads need to be shown as well. The memo that we sent you actually updates this table and the following map. So the update is that basically with all of these section line roads, those would be shown with 100 feet of right-of-way. And it still references the map on the next page, and then we updated that map. So basically what we are at is that some of these streets that I think would probably, you might see a little more traffic, perhaps a little bit greater utilization. A lot of those are shown for 120 feet of right-of-way, so that's the purple streets. And then the section line roads, that's a term that perhaps we're very familiar with, but every mile there's a section, and so the streets in between are called section line roads. So you're in the city jurisdiction, 27th, 40th, 56th Street, those are all section line roads, and that would go for Old Cheney, West Van Dorn, Pioneers. So in the county jurisdiction, unless they're shown in purple, for 120 feet of right-of-way, they would be 100 feet of right-of-way. You might note that a lot of these streets kind of abruptly end, and that is the exhibit that we passed along, because basically what we're showing is that the lighter pink area here is the right-of-way designation in the city's jurisdiction. And almost all of the streets in the city's jurisdiction are shown for 120 feet of right-of-way. So a lot of these darker purple ones lead right from 120 feet in the county to 120 feet in the city jurisdiction. So they really work quite well together, but the map that is going to be in the county subdivision ordinance doesn't show the city one, so that way if we make amendments to the city jurisdiction, we don't have to go and change both of the maps. So that is, when you do hopefully make a motion for approval of this, you would include it with the amendment that we had passed out to on December 5th. So that the right-of-way map then will be right in along with the text. We then note that private roadways need to be in an outlot. And then really kind of the whole crux of the amendment is here on page 195, which it says that as the effective date of this section, which should be sometime in January of 2024, with all new subdivisions, the local streets need to be private roadways. This does grandfather all of the subdivisions either approved through CUPs or preliminary plats prior to that date. So you had one called Wild Acres recently. We've had several other county subdivisions, any of those that had public streets, they would be allowed to do a final plat to do a public street there. So it really is helping into the longer term in terms of not creating any further public streets. So that is kind of the gist of the amendment, along with all of the things that came along with it. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Steve, as the city grows and a county road or development has private streets, who's responsible for upgrading it to city standards?
So if a private roadway becomes annexed into the city limits, they still remain private roadways. Or even if it came in from the county zoning jurisdiction to the city zoning jurisdiction, a private roadway remains a private roadway. So the people within that subdivision continue to maintain that street. Any public streets that are annexed into the city of Lincoln go from the county jurisdiction into the LTU, Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, then has charge of maintaining those streets upon annexation.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Yeah.
In any of these categories, the 120 feet down to the 60, as they're developed and built and taken on as private roadways, are there stipulations for sidewalks and other amenities that go with the road?
Yeah, so since this is an amendment in the county jurisdiction, more than 3 miles away from the city, routinely we do not see sidewalks within those subdivisions. Because often these are built to a county road standard with a ditch, there's often not exactly a perfect space for the sidewalks either. Typically you need to have the curb and a storm sewer system to make sure there's room for a sidewalk.
There's some discussion in the staff report about the question of how this really affects county residents, and certainly it's county residents going forward. But as part of that consideration, was there any opportunity to gain feedback from residents or folks who are typically looking at development within the county to determine what their perspective was?
Not specifically a public hearing or a public meeting of that course. As we were pointing out in the staff report, they're mostly the calls that we have received from people in the past who are already maintaining private roadways and the concerns they had about maintaining private roadways. And typically what it was is if there's such a small group of people, 6 to 10 people,
right.
Some people don't pay their HOA dues, and so now you have even a smaller group of people trying to maintain it, and often they don't have the experience as to what do they need to do. And so those are some of the challenges. So there's pluses and minuses to having always private roadways for the local streets. It helps with the public funding and maintenance costs for those subdivisions, but it does place more of the burden then on the people who live there to maintain it for the long term.
Yep, understood. Yeah.
Steve, I have a question about the one right-of-way that is 120 feet here is, looks like it's South 68th, South 70th, a little section of that from Hickman up to Whitstruck. Can you explain a little bit about why 120 in that particular section?
Well, for that item, I think I'd call Pam Dingman up to help explain the right-of-way designations in the county jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. So what this really is, it is a clarification of our right-of-way. Lancaster County, since the 1950s, and in our office we did try to look back and find that, and we couldn't find it, modified our right-of-way. So whenever we graded a road, we would start with this section line easement, which was 66 feet, and we went, when we graded roads, to a 100-foot section. And the reason that we did that is because, hey, it's Nebraska and we have winter and we need a place to store that snow, and we get a really snowy winter, and we have difficulty with that. And the engineer, then Engineer Dillon, actually did cross sections and photo documentation with those 1950s cars, showing how they didn't fit on the road and there's too much snow. So that was the reason for the 100-foot, and then just kind of bringing that back forward again. The 120 feet really that's a modern road section. And so when we're looking at the areas with 120 feet, they are consistent with our federal aid routes, with one exception, and that is a federal aid route that we're trying to get designated. And so I didn't want to have to come back to you in 4 or 5 months and say, oh, hey, wait a second, we changed, and that's actually 162nd Street for the 3 miles north of Highway 6. And so we're trying to move the designation from 141st Street north of Waverly to 162nd Street, which would help us get federal aid money for 162nd Street. But what we've really found out as we go is modern road sections. We used to have these 10-foot paved lanes, 11-foot paved lanes. Now so your top of your road surface would be 22 feet. Well, now we know that we need 28 feet, especially if we're going to put modern safety features in, like rumble strips and rumble stripes, to alert drivers that they're about ready to leave the pavement. And it's interesting, when we put the rumble strips and stripes in, people don't drive off the edge of the pavement and make those big divots. I mean, to me, it would be more annoying to get your car muddy than it is to hear the noise, but turns out, I guess different people think different things. And in any case, when we go and put those roads in, we also know that, hey, sometimes that's where you might need a turn lane in the future, or additional expansion. So we really know in those major routes that when we go to improve them, we need 120 feet.
You mentioned rumble strips. I would imagine that the road would have a shoulder in the 120 foot. And I just beg you to not extend the rumble strips all the way across the shoulder so bicycles can not get shaken to pieces and have to ride in the roadway.
I think you'll find as we move forward that we are modifying a lot of those practices. Of course, our first goal was just to get that 14-foot lane, which is significant to us. Unfortunately, we as a county, we have more linear miles of 11-foot drive lanes or less than any other county in Nebraska, and we also have the most people on these streets, and so that's been a long-term goal of mine to get that fixed. So.
Other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, is there any testimony in support of this application? Any testimony in support? Any neutral testimony or testimony in opposition?
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
And I would also move that we approve text amendment 23012.
Second, Edens?
Discussion.
All of these make great common sense for moving forward. I am a little concerned about private roadways once the city grows around them, that will become a burden for the city rather than depending upon the amount of traffic. But that's something we would have to face in the future.
I think it makes it clear that when you're going to buy a lot, that's, hey, it's a private roadway, you're going to maintain it. I don't love the idea. I understand the county's trying to count dollars and they got to do that the way they got to do that. We need how many hundreds of bridges replaced? So that's why I'm supporting it, although I don't feel great about it.
Well, as someone who uses these roads and lives in the county, it's a necessity. And so from that standpoint, I agree with what Dick said. I'm wary about what this means in the future, but in the here and now, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I certainly support and understand that our county board as well as our county engineers are trying to be as fiscally prudent as they can given the circumstances, and as a result understand the necessity and will vote to approve. Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. Seeing no one, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Campbell?
Second, Edens?
Jennifer?
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Egerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. We are adjourned.